How do you become a millionaire in trucking, Alex?
Start as a multimillionaire?
Yeah, that joke.
All right, welcome to episode 2 of the still no name podcast, but about trucking and tech, roughly. My name's Alex, and this is my brother Peter. How are you doing today, bud?
Pedro Pascal, apparently.
You saw the comments for last week? Yeah.
I mean, I'll take it as a compliment.
In this episode, it hit me. Dude, we should talk about, can you make money in trucking, right? Then the reason for this is because you sent a good blog to me. I just pull it up if you don't have it already pulled up, but I'll just quickly go over. So in the blog, it was talking about margin, and margin obviously is very low in trucking industries and trucking business, but specifically it was in in design, what margin means in design. And I'll put it right here on the screen as well in post-production. So more work for editing, Alex, but just if you could just give us the bullet points, give us the summary of this blog, Pete.
I don't actually have the blog post. All right, I found it. So there's a few main points. Don't ignore opportunities in consulting is a bullet point. Yes, you're trading time for money, but markets are desperate for good help and will pay generously for it. Consulting, good example of a lot of margin, because effectively it's just your cost. Whatever your cost of living is, you add a markup to that, and there's your profit.
So really quick, just to add, not to add, but to essentially link it to trucking. So if you have 10 trucks, 12 trucks, 15 trucks, 20, 30, 40, 50, whatever, it doesn't matter. There's somebody that has less trucks than you that's probably looking at you and go like, man, how do they do that? Or as humans, we're good in certain areas and not so good in other areas. So there's always somebody that's going to be looking up to you and go like, dude, you're really good in that area. And so in this example, it's like, you want to sell something high margin in trucking? Maybe consulting might be your thing, right? Not your thing as in shut down your trucking business, but maybe there's going to be somebody that will pay you a consulting fee, and you can take that and say, hey, here's how I did this thing really well, right? Now, a lot of areas in your other business, you might have to pay other consultants, or you might have to, learn or implement other programs and services and whatever else, but maybe there is a thing you're doing in trucking that you do exceptionally well. There might be customers out there willing to pay for you, correct?
Yeah, most likely. I mean, a good way to maybe look at consultants is people hire fitness coaches. Why? All of the information you would ever need about fitness is online, available for 20 plus years now. Yet people still hire fitness coaches. So there is an element of a business coach, if you will, i.e. a consultant, that does still make sense for maybe a select few of businesses.
Okay, makes sense. What was the next one?
The next point was create boundaries for yourself. My sister is a freelancer who naturally stays up late and sleeps in. She interviewed for a job that would require her to wake up at 6 a.m. She decided not to pursue it because she knew it wasn't the right fit.
And boundaries, just to kind of make it, again, trucking related, if you don't go to a certain area, right? Because a lot of times, how most trucking companies, or I would say not most, there's certainly a chunk of trucking companies. I don't know what percentage. I don't know if it's a large group or a small group, but there's certainly a group of trucking companies that when they start, they focus on a very specific lane, right? I'm only doing, if you're in Oklahoma, let's say, I'm only doing in Oklahoma City to Illinois and back, right? There's trucking companies that when they start, they focus on a very specific lane. But what happens is they approach those customers and they start fulfilling those lanes and they start doing a good job. And then the customer goes like, hey, I have a load going to Washington, or I have a load going to Montana, or I have a load going to New Jersey. Right? And boundaries in this example, I think, if you're starting your trucking company like that, you're focused on a very specific lane. If you're just going to do, I know some people call it the Loadboard shuffle, which is such a funny name. If you're a trucking company that just does the Loadboard shuffle, this may not apply to you. But if you're the type of trucking company, I was literally talking to a guy, all he did was Los Angeles to Seattle.
Nice.
That was all he did. And there are trucking companies that do this. They focus on a specific lane with tons of volume, and they do just that lane. When your customer calls you and says, hey, I want to send something outside of that lane, tell them, unfortunately, my drivers are not trained to go in that area. I don't think we could do it. Unless it's going to be some ridiculous rate that they're maybe they're paying for a round trip or something that you there's no chances for you to make a mistake on it, or you don't know what the freight coming back is. Unless that's the case, which probably won't be, they want to pay probably just the normal market rate. This would be those boundaries that is being discussed, which is unfortunately either open up a brokerage to not lose that business, or just you have to tell the customer no, right? That seems like that's the boundary in this case.
Yeah, and honestly, the article is pretty short. I would recommend people just to check it out and read it instead of us going through the bullet points and reading it. So maybe we could just stop there, but that would be a pretty good jumping off point. And that is not can you make money in trucking? Why is it so difficult to make money in trucking? And maybe we need to flesh out what the perspectives are. So you have the owner-operator perspective, the driver perspective, the fleet owner perspective. These are not equal. And so in one of the perspectives, making money is hard, and the other one, it's not.
Mm-hmm.
But in that exact example you just gave, if you're doing a lane from point A to point B consistently, and then your customer who's been supporting your business for, years on end, all of a sudden asks you to deviate from that lane, and you say no. Well, what you're doing is you're opening the door for competition to come in, and then inevitably maybe steal your lane or take your lane. Now, I shouldn't say steal, but they would earn the customer's business because they're able to cover lanes A and C and A and B versus you're just able to do A and B.
Right.
And so it's like, why is trucking so difficult to make money? And we can talk about which perspectives we're discussing.
Right. So we're kicking off the discussion essentially with this good blog, essentially margins, right? And why are margins low in trucking? Right? Like, why are they so the number one reason trucking is difficult is because it's low margin. It's really hard to do a business when you barely make any money. Right? That seems to be.
Regardless of industry.
Right.
Low margin is low margin equals difficult business.
Right. And trucking, unfortunately, is a low margin business.
Yeah. Owner operators honestly make so much sense. From anything to do. I actually think if you kind of were to do best case and worst case, regardless of carrier, broker, or anything else, it seems like if you're going to be in trucking, an owner-operator way seems to be the most solid option.
Right.
You have consistently the most amount of freedom with the most amount of revenue.
Right.
Because when you're a fleet owner, and let's say you have 10 owner-operators, for example, well, 5 of them maybe are taking a week off or 2 weeks off, and 5 of them are not. You're still working all the time.
Right.
You, as a fleet owner, you don't get to take 2 weeks off, especially if it's just you.
Right.
An owner-operator, take 2 weeks off anytime you want.
Right.
You had a good month, take 2 weeks off. Now, assuming you're not behind on bills and et cetera, et cetera. Like there's nuance to this discussion. But overall, owner-operator, there's a reason why I think 80% of the industry is owner-operators.
Right, yeah, single truck MCs and whatnot. Okay, so for fleets, right, obviously I had a small fleet. Now I realize that essentially, even though 20, 27 trucks, whatever the case may be, even though that sounds nice, and at the time I was like, oh, I'm, Mr. Hotshot over here, I think I'm so cool. Ultimately, 20, 27, whatever, 30, under 50 trucks ultimately is not a lot of trucks, right? And the problem on top of this being...
a lot.
What?
Statistically, it's a lot, by the way.
Statistically, it's a lot, but relative to how big trucking companies are, how big some trucking companies are, it's actually pretty tiny, right? That's kind of the gist. But on top of the issue of being a low margin business, it seems like to have a stable fleet, that floor keeps growing. What do I mean? The floor, right? The floor is getting higher and higher and higher. Another visualization maybe is there's a canyon, right? And so let's say you want to go from an owner-operator to a fleet manager, right? The canyon is getting wider and wider, right? The middle part is being eroded for fleets more and more and more. And what do I mean? So on top of the fact that, yes, customers are shopping around constantly, whether it's for brokers or other trucking companies, on top of the fact that this is a low-margin business, you also have other issues like, hey, well, I can't hire, let's say, an accountant until I have 10, 15 trucks, right? Because let's say an accountant charges whatever, couple $1,000s a month for maybe part-time you start out with, right? You can't hire that person full-time until you have 15, 20 trucks. So that's like one level, right? But unfortunately you need an accountant day one because then you're trying to work your way backwards, dig yourself out of the hole when you don't have an account, right? Same thing with a safety manager or a training program. It's like there's not enough margin in the trucking companies or from all the trucks. There's not enough margin from all the trucks until you have 50 to afford a safety manager, right? And so that becomes challenging too. So it's like, what that means is until you have 50, you could have an accident. Your training might not be so good. So there might be some other issue occurs that shuts you down before you get to the level that you can hire a full-time safety manager. Or a training, right? Recruiting, training, like all of that stuff is really difficult. Hiring people, right? Obviously the industry is always hiring. And it's like, you can't pay for a recruiter or a hiring manager or a training program until you're like at 100 trucks because there's not enough margin coming in from all those trucks until you're that size. And so and this is why I make the argument that it's a canyon or a floor that you have to keep trying to jump higher to, is because it gets more and more difficult it's really difficult to have a sustainable small fleet because you don't have enough margin to put any of these things in place.
Right. And even if you were the hiring manager or the safety manager or the accountant, who's going to do dispatching? So then you have to outsource dispatching. But when you outsource dispatching, even if you do 5% remote, 8% remote, whatever, well, then the quality of dispatching goes down. So then the revenue per truck goes down.
Right.
It's a really difficult juggling task to
Right.
wear all hats effectively when you do not have enough revenue to hire out those specific roles.
Right. And
Very like respect to all the people who are running 10 plus truck operations by themselves. That's a lot of work.
right, and we're not even talking about insurance requirements yet either, which is another like massive can of worms, because from my understanding, Progressive doesn't take you if you have more than 10, right? And so if you get to more than 10 in less than 2 years, they actually will not take you. What was that?
Right. Thanks, Obama. I'm not. It's not actually related to Obama. It's just a joke.
Right. Yeah, just blame everything on Obama, as the joke goes. But like if you have more than 10 trucks in the first 2 years, and Progressive is like basically one of the only ones that'll insure you the first 2 years. If you get to more than 10, they will drop you, right? And so because then you become technically a fleet, and so now you're shopping. If you're stuck between that 10 and like if you're over 10 in the first 3 years, it limits who can insure you. And because you're bigger than most of the companies that do insure new companies, like then they don't want to take either. So it's almost like not only is it all these problems that we've outlined, they also want you to stay small. they don't want you to succeed, right?
And by the way, right? Like you can get mad all you want, but they have a copious amount of data showing exactly why, for the exact reasons that you just outlined, because you do not have a training program, you do not have a safety manager, you do not have any of these things. So inevitably, because you're trying to grow on a one-man or two-man operation, you're lacking in some places. Insurance companies know that, and they don't want that liability. It makes so much when you're in it, it feels personal.
Yes.
When you get out of it, you can start to maybe observe some perspectives.
Right.
So, embracing the insurance way of looking at it starts to make a lot of sense why that's the case. How do you become a millionaire in trucking, Alex?
Start as a multimillionaire?
Yeah, that joke. Did you see? I sent you this thing on Instagram, and maybe we can link it. Maybe we shouldn't. But there was a guy on Instagram who is driving a Rolls Royce to paint a picture. He's driving a Rolls Royce, has a wad of cash on the center console, and in big letters, he's got $12 million in trucking first 5 years.
Right.
Now, and it says, now I'm the boss of bosses. Now, it doesn't say if that's revenue, if that's profit. We're kind of assuming revenue.
Right.
But basically, if you see that on Instagram, can we just, that's just that's just bullshit.
Right. No, look, hold on. The first thing I asked you, right? I messaged you back, how much revenue did you do in your 5 years?
13.6 million. I counted it.
Okay, so you did 13.6 in 5 years, and he did 12 in 5.
And I'm not driving a Rolls Royce. I'm driving a Jeep Cherokee XJ, guys.
Yeah, a 2001 or something, too.
It's a great car.
So, I mean, look, granted, you it's like, again, a little bit of nuance, right? It's not that it is bullshit, but it's essentially it's doable, it's revenue, and we don't know exactly how it's stacked or what, if it's company drivers or all owner operators, right? Owner operators tend to have a little bit more margin, it's possible. But it's not, just because you did 12, that doesn't mean you can get a Rolls. And now we know too how you can finance anything, or maybe short-term rent a Rolls, right? Maybe you rent a Rolls for $5,000 to sell your course, knowing full well, right? It's like you rent that sucker for 1 month, and then you could be a big baller for 1 month, sell $200,000 worth of programs or courses or whatever, and then there you go. That's essentially how it's done.
If we're talking about legitimate wealth here, if you're trying to fake it, it's very possible to fake. You can lease, you can rent, you can do all these things. I'm sure the monthly payments on a Rolls Royce is like $5,000 to $7,000. There's lease payments on trucks, semis that are $4,000 to $5,000. So a Rolls Royce, leasing one Rolls Royce in a fleet of 10 trucks, you can fake it and look rich. But who are you tricking? The audience. So we're trying to assume on the basis of true wealth here, that you can actually afford a car and not fake it. But the other way that you could actually do this is to ship for the cartel. A classic Ozark situation. That's how you make money in trucking, guys. Ship oranges, all right? get paid $18 a mile because cocaine, and why is that profitable? Because cocaine has high margins.
Right.
Obviously, I'm saying this as a joke.
Right.
And then, not to mention, could you imagine, the stress of dealing with a broker for being late on a shipment? Imagine being late or delayed on a shipment for the cartel. You're not losing your trucking business; you're losing your arm.
Oh man,
that would be.
I mean, I've seen several YouTube shorts now that essentially Southern California is like owned. Some of that part of the land is owned, not owned, but like, it's basically controlled by the cartel. And they obviously in California, it's legal to grow marijuana, but in other states it's not. And so now all they got to do is just stuff a truck full of marijuana, ship it to other states. They don't even have to go across the border anymore.
Oh, interesting. So they're doing their illegal growth in California. So then they don't have to go through the Border Patrol.
Yes, right. And the Border Patrol is the one that's always. Whereas there's like you looked up last episode, there's 4 million trucks on the road or something. It's like, What's one dry van or another dry van or another, and you can package it tight so it doesn't smell so bad, whatever the case may be, right? And like that right there is concerning because like, what are they paying drivers? And I mean, there's tons. I've seen several videos too. It's like, like we're not even talking like, okay, marijuana legal in California, obviously, that's and many other states, but what about illegal activities, whether it is drugs like you mentioned, like cocaine, or like human trafficking? A guy made a video, literally he got paid $100,000 to do 500 miles.
How much?
And the $100,000 to do 500 miles.
That's a good rate per mile.
The trailer was full of people.
Jesus Christ. Did he know? The driver?
I don't know. I don't know. He definitely got arrested.
I would not be able to do that.
So, like, whether it's drugs or human trafficking, it's like, it's like when you're seeing this stuff on Instagram, trucking is not that easy. Don't be that naive of like you in a few years that you can be driving a Rolls Royce. Granted, there are some fake ways to do it. Like, you know what I mean? There's some shady ways, but like we've outlined in this episode, that there are some legitimate challenges in the industry, and there's like legitimate margin issues in the industry and competitiveness in it. So it's like, don't be misled by some of those, not so good Instagram posts, I guess.
Yeah, it's nonsense. People who flex and it's like, oh, this came from trucking. I would take that with a grain of salt. Right.
But keep in mind, like with 15 owner-operators, let's say you're dispatching, you and your brother or a couple, like we know you could dispatch 7 trucks. A solid dispatcher can dispatch 7 trucks.
Right.
On 7 trucks, if you're charging 12-15% to lease on and the owner-operator is paying for insurance, you're making 10 to 12% easily. If you're dispatching 15 trucks at $20,000 a truck, what is that? It's like $300,000? I mean, your net is $30,000.
Right. Times 10, that's 300,000. Times 20, that's 600,000. You can start to see how the numbers start to add up.
Right. So if you and your boy are dispatching 15 trucks, you're both making together $30,000 a month. You think you couldn't set aside $5,000 for a Rolls Royce?
Right. Can I just add that if you're dispatching 7 trucks by yourself, you could probably do 10 or 11 with Dispatch Robot. Just throwing that out there.
But yeah, so there's a way to do it, just like, you know what I mean, cutting corners and whatnot to make it work.
So here, that's actually a good way of looking at it. It's like, what would be better? Like, what's more difficult, having a fleet or having owner operators? That's an opaque question because they're different difficulties.
Correct. Right.
And so if you have a fleet, we can take this example for people who are interested in trucking, who have a fleet, who are like maybe struggling with our early year struggles. And that is, let's say you have a case A is 10 company trucks, case B is 10 owner operators. And you go like, well, what's better and what's harder? And I would argue that the owner operator model is better. However, the company one is easier. It's more expensive though.
Yes.
So A is expensive and easy. B is harder and better. Like so, it's this weird trade-off because with your company trucks, it's just really expensive, and you might go like, well, why is it more difficult? Well, fundamentally, an owner operator is a subcontractor. He sets his own hours.
Right.
So you don't have a standardized schedule. That's A. Right. B is you're probably not only sourcing owner operators from your own zip code. Right. Why would you? Why would you artificially limit yourself to owner operators from your own zip code?
Right.
And so what ends up happening is your fleet is dispersed throughout America. So you have one truck in this state, one truck in that state. Which customer is going to give you business?
Right. So it's hard to
On a one truck basis that you can give one truck per week.
Yeah, so it's
With
hard to
your own
build a
fleet,
book of
yeah.
business with owner operators, right?
Yeah.
So it's
With your own
harder
fleet, you
as
have
in
10
like
trucks.
you can't build an actual legitimate trucking business, right? But it is better because you are a little bit more profitable. Seems like, right? Because
Yeah. Now here's the other difficulty, right? Branding. Right. So with your own trucks, you put on decals, you make them look good, et cetera, et cetera. You're not ever worried that people are just going to take off those stickers. Right. With an owner-operator, he might want to take his boat out for the weekend. So he takes off the decals. Oh, then you get him a load fund day. Decals are not ready to go back on, so he puts on paper ones. Like there's so many different avenues about this that making money is easier doing the owner-operator route versus having a fleet is the easier kind of business and brand route.
right.
And if you genuinely care about customer experience and kind of putting a good foot forward, having your own fleet is kind of a no-brainer. But it's so incredibly difficult on the money side.
Right. So it seems like though that's why a lot of the companies, right, they have a good group of company drivers, right? Like most companies, you start out as a company driver, and then what do they offer you? A lease purchase. Hey, you could become an owner operator, right? Now, granted, I know there's not some good histories.
You're going to get some hate in the comments for supporting that.
I'm not recommending lease purchase, but that's essentially why they do that, because they've crunched the numbers over and over and over that they make more money on lease purchase trucks than they do company drivers, right? And so that's why they push drivers into a lease purchase oftentimes, right? But they do need some drivers because they want to service their customers in their local base, right? But dude, it just goes to show you that trucking is absolutely not easy, right? And it's like you're getting hit from every angle possible all the time. But what I do want to add to your thing is like some of the fastest growing biggest companies are certainly a lot owner operator based, a lot. Right, whether it's Cloud Trucks, which I've interviewed for the other podcast, and it's like Cloud Trucks
venture capital money,
right? Venture capital and all owner operators, right? All owner operators, 450 trucks.
Which, by the way, they have not addressed any of the difficulties that come with having owner operators. They just have more money.
Right. I mean, they have 30, 40, 70 engineers making an app that you could book trucks and route yourself.
Right, but still, those owner operators for sure probably get violations here and there. They for sure affect the MC score. They have all of the same challenges that every single fleet in America has. They just have millions of dollars to be able to use those, deal with those as from a buffer perspective. By the way, that's also known as margin.
Right.
Margin is just a buffer for problems.
Right. And so then the advice for people, because I'm still getting messages on Instagram, I'm still getting messages across all like the numerous platforms, whatever. I'm getting calls to, it's like, hey, I'm just thinking about starting my business. You know what I mean? Like any advice, any pointers? It's like, well, you know, if you're gonna actually try to think and start a trucking business, and you're trying not to go the owner operator route. Let's say you actually want to have drivers and whatnot.
Right.
What advice do you have for people like that, Pete?
So it's real quick before I answer that.
Okay.
I want to get two things to note. One of the things that took me a while to understand about trucking and why it's kind of difficult as a small business is I'm going to just break down everything down to unit economics of $1.
Okay.
And so in trucking, when you start out, you take $1. Like any new business, you have $1. And you're like, okay, I need to spend this $1 to like market myself, to get out there, put myself in front of customers. Mm-hmm. And with trucking, well, 30% of that dollar goes to equipment.
Okay.
20% of that dollar goes to equipment operating expenses. 30% of that dollar goes to insurance. 10% of that dollar goes to maintenance. And before you've even started doing any marketing, customer exposure, etc., anything that new businesses need to do to stand out, you're left with a very small fraction of that dollar.
Right.
This is why it's super tough for small businesses. And when you're talking about low unit economics, the people who win are the ones that have more dollars.
Right.
This is the fundamental concept that we're talking about. And so if what you have to spend 80% of your money on is the thing that big companies have thousands of, trucks and trailers, you're already losing, because then you only have 10% of your dollar left to go chase customers.
Right.
Versus if you start a business with low overhead costs, you get to take up 90% of your dollar to go get new businesses and new customers or building new products, where established companies have a huge overhead that they're only spending 50%. It becomes inverse, actually. That big companies have an inverse problem. As they get bigger, it's like they spend less of their dollar on getting new customers versus a new company can spend more of their dollar. Versus in trucking, a new company has less money to spend on getting new customers than a big company.
And so the only thing they can compete on is price, right? So, interesting.
And it's like, you know what would revolutionize trucking, by the way? $1 per mile. Like, here you want to have a successful trucking company? Here you go. Anywhere in America for $1 a mile. That's it. That's your website. Ship with us anywhere in America for $1 a mile.
So kind of like what Uber's doing, right? It's like $7, $5, $10, whatever, right? And you jump in an Uber, but Uber loses money on every single rider.
Well, they just had their first profitable quarter. Actually, I'm not sure how they pulled that off.
Yeah. That's a good point.
But that would be like, hold on, that would be amazing.
A revolutionary trucking business model.
Yeah, that's the website. I could just visualize in my head. Anywhere in America for $1 a mile. Now, why is that not possible? Obviously, there's a ton of reasons.
Right.
And then people that go like, oh, we need to make more in trucking. Like, here's the other thing. When you're in trucking, it's like, yes, I want to charge more per mile. But shipping is a cost. And I give this analogy for people that's more consumer friendly. It's Christmas time, and you want to send your family a box of goodies. So you go to UPS, and you go like, hey, how much does it cost to send this small little 5-pound box? And they go, well, it's $400. You're like, man, that's more than the stuff that's in the box.
Right.
You go to I said UPS as the example, right? You go to FedEx and they go like, it's $50.
Take my money.
Who do you ship with?
Yeah.
Who do you ship with?
Right.
And UPS goes like, well, we're gonna give you images of your box when it's on the doorstep. You're like, that's cool, but it's not worth $350.
No. Hold on. We pay our drivers more, right?
Yeah, we
pay our drivers more. And you're like, well, I actually don't care what the driver makes. As a consumer, right, like shipping something, right, in this personal example, you are shipping something for Christmas. You actually don't care at all what the UPS driver makes. And you don't care if UPS is using that as a sales tactic. We pay our drivers more. You don't care.
To zoom out even further, people only deal with interfaces, not backends.
Right.
And so the interface is, can you get it from point A to point B for what price? That's the interface.
Cheap,
and so in trucking,
safe.
Yep. And so in trucking, it's the same interface. It's just more industrial. And that is, I have a piece of machinery that costs $50,000 or $20,000, and I need to ship it from point A to point B. I'm going to source the lowest cost to shipping that is still reliable, because that's what every person does.
Right.
And so there's this natural market force at play. Now you can go around that by shipping stuff that is more sensitive, which, by the way, has higher insurance regulations and costs. So it's like, yes, you can ship hazmat, yes, you can ship bombs, but then like you have to hire a specific type of driver.
Peter.
You have to have what?
I think it's the technical term is ordnance.
Ordnance, yeah. All right, there we go. But it's like, then you have to have a U.S. born citizen. You can't even have a naturalized citizen. So then your hiring pool becomes like, there's no easy solution to any of it.
Right. But to go back to the question that I asked earlier, which is like, okay, obviously people are still reaching out. How they want to get into trucking? They want to get a fleet going. What advice do you have for those people?
Yeah. So I will say before the answer, I do not regret doing trucking for 6 years. I actually think in terms of a formative experience, it was absolutely the best thing ever. Okay. I would completely redo the exact experience. It was that positive. And 6 years, I feel like, is a pretty good amount of time. So what I would do day one is actually just see if you can like go work in a trucking company in any position. I do not care if it's dispatch or if you can get driver, non-CDL. See if you can get your feet wet without being committed. And then just see if you even like doing the dang work. Because if you absolutely hate dispatching after 2 months, dude, running your own fleet is going to be miserable. No days off. And it's like, it was literally 7 days a week. You and I could attest to this. We're talking about, on average, 100 to 150 phone calls 5 days a week, and then probably 50 phone calls over the weekends. 7 days a week. And so first things is just get your feet wet with the least amount of resistance.
Or least amount of investment, maybe. right? It's like you don't have to spend any money on an insurance requirement, on DOT numbers, none of that, right? Like, but of course, look, these people are messaging me. They probably want to get in the business already. So it's like more than like either they don't know what they're coming into, or alternatively, like this may not be super applicable to them because they're going to get in regardless. But assuming they're going to get in no matter what, and assuming they like it, what advice do you have for them?
Yeah. So if that's the case, if they want to be a driver or a fleet owner, let's assume fleet owner in this case, I would absolutely start with owner-operator model, and maybe even non-CDL.
I see. Why?
Again, least amount of restrictions, because once you get into IFTA's a headache. You have to do mileage calculation. Now, there's been a lot of automation since 2017.
Right.
So it's now getting easier, especially with, I think, what is it? The ELD, the big one that's funded by Google.
Motive, or formerly Keep Trucking?
Motive, yeah. I'm pretty sure they do it automatically.
Right, yeah. No. Basically, every ELD can track and generate a report.
But you still have to sign up. You have to still get IRP plates from the state. You still have to go to this. Like, it's not as simple as one checkpoint. It's like 10 checkpoints for different states, and there's always something. And it's every quarter. It's just ridiculous. So I would go least amount of headache, which would be non-CDL, whether it be box trucks, hot shots. I do not care. Like, it's all going to be difficult, by the way, from day one, no matter what easy path you take. And so difficult and regulatory is kill me, but just difficult is doable. So just do that, and then start with one, and really kill it for that one guy. You're not going to make a lot of money. You're going to maybe you'll make $1,000 a month, maybe make $1,500. So make sure you have some savings, or be ready to go into credit card debt and be extreme. And just do that naturally. If that person is doing well, it's always happened where word of mouth works. They'll tell their buddy who wants to get into trucking to go buy a truck, and then they'll lease onto you. But maybe if that doesn't happen, you can start to lease on other people, whether that be through paid ads like job boards where you're trying to find something, whether that be connecting with other trucking companies that do not want to take owner-operators. This happens all the time. People are willing to share owner-operators because they just don't want to add any more. Their insurance doesn't let them add. There's various reasons why they can't add an owner-operator. Maybe their schedule requirements don't work. And see if you can add owner-operators. And I would say get to 5.
Right.
With 5, it's still very reasonable to do it by yourself. You can do it from home, so you don't need an office to this point. By the way, we were renting out a residential area when we were leasing on a truck. We had I should show a picture of our office back then. We were literally in a living room. It's like 6 desks in one living room, and so we really maxed that space out. So I would just keep doing that, and then if after 5, like it's really starting to work, and you have a decent amount of money, you can maybe think about getting one truck as your own company truck.
Right. This to start approaching maybe local business, local customers,
and keep that ratio maybe about 20%. 20% of your fleet is company. 80% of your fleet is owner operators. But first and foremost, make sure you take care of the owner operator.
Right.
And this is where trucking goes back to being difficult. Our kind of personalities, we will lose money on every single transaction if it's a good customer experience.
Mm-hmm. Right.
This is why we don't get rewarded in trucking, by the way. Because when a broker is breathing down your neck and saying like, oh, you're putting me in a bad spot, like if the truck genuinely broke down. Like let's say your truck genuinely broke down. This is not your fault. And the broker is basically crying / cussing you out because they're going to lose their business and they're going to carrier 411 you. So they're going to put you on a list. And you go like, okay, I'll do anything to get the shipment on time. Or you can be the type of person that's like, dude, kick rocks. Trucks break. We were the types of people that would like figure out the solution.
Right. Pay for the tow truck out of pocket, pay for the forklift, move over the load, give it to another driver, pay the driver more than you have in the load.
I've had situations with an owner operator one time who would get loaded on a Saturday morning. Broker gave us an amazing load, urgent delivery, has to be there Monday, pays above market, everything's perfect. Saturday afternoon, the guy's truck breaks down. We have no one in the area. And it's like brokers in a panic. And it's like, what do you do? It's like, well, I was going to go hang out on Saturday. And what I did in that particular case was I called all my buddies in the industry. Luckily, one guy was 250 miles away, a buddy of mine, completely different MC. I called the broker. I say, here's a friend in the industry. Here's his MC. Give away the load to him full price. I'm not making $1 on this. You're not rewarded in trucking for doing the right thing.
and solving customers' problems, and that is probably what makes it really difficult. If I had to sum it up, and forget the money, forget all this thing, you're not rewarded for doing the right thing in trucking.
Well, how does Top Gear on that terrible disappointment? No, or wait.
I mean, I do read the comments, and I think you do too. But if people genuinely have questions that either we missed or they want to ask, feel free. Because the entire point here for myself and Alex is we see people charge for information, and charging for information just feels kind of strange because the secret is the hard work.
Mm-hmm. Right.
You know, it's like, how do you get six-pack abs? You eat well and you work out consistently.
Yeah.
And when someone sells you the plan to get six-pack abs, it doesn't feel very genuine.
Right.
Because they know that most people are not going to eat well and be consistent in their workout. And that's the secret. It's the hard work.
Right. Yeah, and it's like because we like I know from my end, I know trucking is difficult. I genuinely thought it was unethical to sell a course or a program or whatever, because I know how difficult it is and I know the failure rate is high. And it's like if I'm going to sell something,
Tow Piglet would have been in a Rolls Royce if he sold courses.
Right. But if I'm going to sell something, I want it to actually increase your odds of success, not just be another statistic. That was like the way I always looked at selling information. If you're going to buy some information from me, it needs to make you an outlier compared to everyone else. It's like if the average trucking business stays in business or stays active for 9 or 10 months, I think that's the actual statistic. It's like I would want my information to keep you in business 2 years. Like double, right? It's like if I can guarantee my information will keep you in business longer than anyone, like than the average, then that's a worthwhile purchase of information. The problem is generally that's not how information gets sold. It's just a bunch of repackaged other content and whatnot. So, yeah, no, absolutely. I read all the comments. I try to respond to everything too as soon as the videos goes up too. If you have any questions, so I think this would be a good start. It's gonna be just knowledgeable, nitty gritty, in the details, in the weeds information. Any final thoughts for the episode?
I was just gonna add a good way to think about it is information to be valuable has to be embodied.
Explain.
Think of consciousness or like your soul. Well, you need to be trapped in your body for these things to manifest.
Okay.
So information on its own is not valuable. It has to be embodied. And so that's where the hard work comes in. That's where the individual themselves come in. It's like you can have all the information. Like it's like, how do you make rockets? Like if Elon Musk told you exactly how to make rockets, could you do it?
No.
Like I'm talking about a step 1 through step 1 million. You know what the first requirement is? Have a few $100 million. Oh, once you get that, recruit the best engineers. How many best engineers are there? The ones that work at SpaceX are the best ones. That's it. There are no more best engineers.
Right.
So the information here is not the valuable part. And by the way, SpaceX does know something that other people don't. But it's still then embodied in the actual people carrying out that information. And so that's where it's just selling information alone is it's not wrong. It's just not optimal because we know that the information isn't the gatekeeper at the end of the day.
Right.
That's it. They're selling an artificial gatekeeper.
Right.
You know, it's like one of those driveway fences where it's like you have the driveway that's 20 feet wide, and then they put just a gate for 10 feet in the middle, and you just drive around that. Right. That's what courses are. It's like pay us to go through this gate. It's like dude, just go around the gate.
That's funny. Hey, well, I think this is a good one. Thank you so much. Look forward to your comments, and I'll see you next week.